I'll never forget the day that my son pulled a drowning man out of a pond. You know, for most of us, adulthood comes with thousands of experiences create an adult, right? Like we don't become an adult overnight, but every once in a while there's an experience or an event that you can point to and be like, that moment made my son a man. So every year, my son and I go to this music and dance camp in the Sierra Mountains, and it's just 10 days of bliss. We act in plays, we take dance classes, we swim in the pond, we work in the communal kitchen, we party with our friends. It's pure heaven. And this particular year, I'm at the play practice, and I'm standing behind the theater, and I notice there's a commotion going on down at the pond that's like 900 feet away. And apparently, one of the elders of the community, Wayne, had a heart event, and he slipped under the water. And now people were administering CPR to him. So we're all huddled there around the theater, like trying to see what's happening. And I see this ambulance pull up and 3 EMTs jump out, and they're trying to assess the situation. And I scan the area and I see all these members of the community that are kind of like in a line. And then Wayne is lying there and they're all waiting to administer CPR. And as I scan, I notice there in the corner is my son, Alistair, 21 years old. And at first I thought, like, what's he doing down there? You know, like a parent. Like, what's he in that mess for? Like, I should get him away from there. I should go down and tell him to move away, but I resisted. And so a little while later, I see him on the path, and he's surrounded by a bunch of friends, and he seems like really shaken up. And I walk up, I'm like, what happened? How are you okay? What's going on? And what did you see? And my son looks at me and he says, Mama, I pulled him in. I pulled him out of the water. I carried him in. Oh, wow. My God, I felt so shaken up by that. I put my arms around my son, and it turned out that Wayne had been in the water, swimming sort of in the more shallow part of the water, and he was surrounded by a bunch of little children. He was always surrounded by little children because he loved them and they loved him, and he was just always telling stories and playing with the little kids. And he had some kind of heart event and was crying out for help, sunk under the water, and all the little kids then started crying out for help. And Alistair, my son, was the first one to get there and pull him out of the water to shore. And he said, I feel like I could have gotten there sooner. He was like, by the time I reached him, Mom, his eyes were rolled in the back of his head. And he was really stiff to carry. So over a dozen people had lined up that day to give Wayne CPR. Right? How beautiful is that? I don't know if you've ever given CPR or been around, but apparently it's very tiring. So if you can, you line up and you take turns so that you can keep it going. And that's what everybody who saw it did. They were all lining up, waiting to do it. Anybody that knew how to do it. And Alistair was lined up too, waiting for his turn, but he never got a chance because Wayne did die. Yeah. And the ambulance took him away. And as a community, you know, we were kind of grappling and grieving with this. But we were comforted by the fact that this man had died with his community around him, right? He died in the best place on earth, doing what he loved, hanging out with kids. And everybody in his life had come around him to try to save him. So anyway, the week that followed this event, my son the community just swarmed around my son. I couldn't have asked for a better place for him to be. Like, it was so sweet to see, grown men come and wrap their big man arms around him, and people just would sit with him in silence or talk to him if he needed to talk. And true to form, he and I didn't really hang out much at the camp because that's kind of our habit. Like, he goes off and hangs out with his friends, and I go off and party with my friends. And we see each other, in passing, but I didn't really get to talk to him much after that first day. And I'd ask about him from people who'd seen him. I was worried, right? I'm like, he just went through this horrible thing. Like, doesn't he need me? Doesn't he need his mom? So anyway, the last day of camp comes, and I am ready to go. We're all packed up, and I'm like, let's go jump in the pond. Let's jump in it was a ritual. On the last day, we would jump into the pond and get really cold before we get into the hot car and drive home. And I was like, can we do that? And Alistair was hesitant. Like, looking back is like, duh. Like, he didn't want to go back to the pond, to the scene of the trauma, right? But I wasn't thinking at all, and I was just thinking of how hot I was, how hot the car was going to be. So I jump into the water, and I'm swimming around, and I swim out to the dock, and I do a little sunbathing and try to soak in the magic before we have to go home. And I noticed that Alistair has grabbed a raft, and he had one of those round jobbies with the hole in this, like a donut. And he's sitting in the middle with just his butt in the water, and he's got his big old man legs draped over the side. And then finally he's like, come on, Mom, I want to go home, let's go. So I jump in the water and I start swimming, but his voice catches me. He says, pull me in, Mama. Carry me in. I didn't want to say anything to ruin it, but in that moment I knew that my big grown-up adult son still needed to feel like a little kid, still needed his mom, to know that his mom could pull him in. So I grabbed one foot of his, and then the other arm I'm like trying to swim to shore, and just really awkwardly, just laughing the whole way. I did. I pulled him in. I pulled my son back to shore. Thank you.